So there are a lot of things in the spell. So the idea of the spell that Doctor Strange cast was that everybody who knew who Peter Parker was coming into this world through the gaps in the multiverse or whatever. And in particular, it was just like the people who hated or felt strongly about Peter or whatever. So the people who came through were Peter Parker himself in various, from various other universes, but also the core villains. They all came over. And then the end of the film is about Peter accepting that in order to fix the problem that he caused, he was going to have to actually accept a worse punishment for this, which is Doctor Strange would just cast the spell again with no qualifiers. Everybody would forget who Peter Parker is. But there are obviously a lot of like real big technical problems to this. Because first of all, like a lot of the people in other universes, does that mean that, first of all, did he impose costs on Tobey Maguire? Does he go back to his version of MJ and does she not know who he is now? Like, because if this applies across the multiverse and the rift to their universe is open, at least enough that he could, have, like
you're getting to an issue where this Marvel's going down a road that
they can't resolve this at some point.
And it's leading me to just being less and less. I just don't care. Like
this is a problem that they had with the comics as well.
100%.
Once you introduce that multiverse and like what you do in this universe affects things in another universe, and it's just a whole mess. Yeah. But you get to retcon everything. So
that's the thing. That's the thing. Like they're gonna end up with the ability. And the funny thing is, DC films are doing exactly the same thing right now. Their next movie that's coming out in the DCEU is a Flashpoint movie, where instead of a magic rift in space-time, it is a, sort of a quantum rift caused by Flash exceeding the speed barrier, basically, which they kind of set up at the end of Justice League, right? And I'm fairly confident that DC is going to use that as a way of resetting the tone of their superheroes a little bit. This is my bet. If I think it's the only thing that DC could do at this point that would enable them to successfully bring back somebody like Henry Cavill as Superman is if they shift through one of these kinds of processes. And I think MCU is doing the same thing, except for it's going to get real weird over the next several movies. I mean, I don't really know what Multiverse of Madness is doing in terms of bringing in different characters and everything else, but they're going to have to deal with the plot holes that this creates because they're pretty sizable. And if you factor in Loki, they're already pretty significant, So I don't know. I'm a little bit intrigued by that. There's gonna be a sort of a critical mass of confusion and difficulty understanding.
Yeah, and I think right, and I think this is something that's going to end up hurting them because they're making so much content, TV shows, comic books, movies that are all tying together. Like I actually had this conversation with my wife last night, and I got home and I was like, "This is a pretty good movie. Like it's fine. Like I'm being very downer." Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I mean, I feel like it's compared to everyone seeing this movie's praises. I mean, I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I don't want to make people think that this movie sucks because it doesn't. But I was talking to my wife last night and she hasn't been invested in the MCU, so to speak. Like the last movie she saw was maybe like Thor 2 or something like that. And she's basically like, well, I don't even know where to, like, I don't want to start over. There's 27 movies already in the Avengers Endgame saga, I believe, or somewhere, a lot of movies. And I just don't have the time, or I just don't know where to start. So I feel like I can't just jump in at the latest point of entry, latest Spider-Man movie. And obviously that's not the majority because this movie's making $1 billion already, but it's something you got to, like, this is the problem that I don't think they've probably really thought through all the way down the line, because while we might watch all this stuff, we're not the majority of people. And while we might care about Loki going or not care about Loki going forward, not every superhero is Spider-Man. And they've already killed off, or unfortunately Black Panther is,
that wasn't their fault, but
like, where do you
they're stuck with the results.
Right. Yeah. So like you have made choices to take off your main box office draws, and you don't own your biggest one. And I just don't like Multiverse of Madness. I think is going to be interesting because I feel like Doctor Strange is kind of the last one besides Guardians of the Galaxy to be kind of maybe that box office draw. And it'll be interesting to see, because it's going to, like, Spider-Man is obviously, there's going to be maybe some some more enthusiasm for the MCU moving forward.
Well, I've got
I'm fascinated to see if there's how long those tails are.
So our trusty associate who does social media for Out of Frame, Matt Hampton, gave me a little fact sheet for the movie. Apparently, the sequel, whatever, the fourth movie in the Tom Holland Spider-Man thing is apparently already in pre-production now. So they're already talking about writing scripts and stuff for that. So, which, again, you just made $1 billion. Like, let's not, let's.
You already set it up. You know who the villain's going to be.
So
not that hard.
Oh, I was going to say the other thing, like pulling in nostalgia. So from all these different universes and stuff, one of the interesting things that, so this is actually fascinating to me because, you guys, Jen, you didn't watch Hawkeye either, did you? Oh, okay.
No,
all right,
I
cool.
watched it.
So I don't want to talk about Hawkeye a ton, but I am going to have to unfortunately spoil a big chunk of Hawkeye. Well, like sort of the big bad of Hawkeye is Wilson Fisk, played by Vincent D'Onofrio. So Hawkeye already pulls in the Netflix MCU into the real MCU, right? Like it actually pulls in the Netflix shows. And then in Spider-Man, frankly, one of my favorite little bits of nostalgia was seeing Peter Parker has to hire a lawyer because he's in all of these legal troubles. So he gets Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, to come in.
That was probably the callback that I loved the most in this movie. And I want nothing more for the MCU than to bring back Daredevil. Like Charlie Cox's Daredevil. I want it here's
how is Disney going to be able to fit that into?
They can't.
PG
this is
movies?
the weird part. This is the weird part.
They can't. That's the problem.
Because this happened in Hawkeye, my mother-in-law watched Hawkeye with us, and she got into it. We watched a handful of the Disney Plus shows with my mother-in-law, so she's kind of invested in those. And so we got to the end of Hawkeye, and she's like, "Well, who's this guy?" Right? Like, I don't know who this Wilson Fisk guy is. Man, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, we need to get you into the Netflix series." So we have been going through. We're into Daredevil season 2. We watched Daredevil over the break. We watched Daredevil season 1.
Season 2 is
fantastic.
The best season.
We watched season 1. We watched Jessica Jones. Now we're 4 episodes into season 2, which is basically the end of the first chunk of Punisher stuff in season 2, and then he just went back to his apartment and found Elektra sitting there in his apartment. And so that's where we've kind of left off as a cliffhanger, and we're going to continue on from there in the relatively near future. But we're watching that. And then, by the way, the other day I made my wife watch she's going to hate me at some point for all these things. I made her watch the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie.
What did you make her watch? Oh, no! That movie doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. It's so bad.
Look, we were real tired, and I was looking for something that we were literally not going to have to think about in any way. And holy cow, that movie is awful, first of all. But secondly, night and day from that movie to Netflix and what Netflix did with those characters. And look, say what you want about Iron Fist and kind of like where it kind of ended, not in a not perfect way, but Daredevil season 1 and 2 are fantastic. Jessica Jones season 1 is fantastic. Luke Cage season 1 is fantastic. These are really, really good shows. But Paul, you're totally right, man. Like, how are you gonna get Charlie Cox Daredevil, who's beating people to a bloody pulp in alleys, turn around and be in this bright Spider-Man world? You know, I don't know. I don't know how you fit those together. You're going to have to really, you're going to end up like sort of defanging Daredevil and taking what's really great about that series and how gritty and sort of, dark it is. And you're going to ruin that in order to bring Daredevil into this world. You know what I mean? So,
or alternate solution, don't.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have to have everything into the expanded MCU. Like, we just don't. Like, there's always that option. You don't have to ruin
I've got
things.
another option for Disney that they're not going to take, though, which is do an R-rated Daredevil movie. Like, be okay with an R-rated version of this. Like, not every one of these movies has to be PG or PG-13 or whatever. Like, Logan, for example, finally, after 2 decades of X-Men, finally they were like, oh, maybe we could do an R-rated Wolverine movie. And oh my God, it's great. Right? Like, it took them forever. Yeah. It took them until Deadpool proved that people would go see an R-rated superhero movie, which is dumb because of course they will. Like, it's absurd.
I mean, if they are so dedicated to the PG-13 limit on the MCU that they are going to water down Blade to a PG-13, man. I don't see how they go for an R-rated Daredevil.
Yeah, I agree.
Don't. Which is galling.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree that they're not going to do it right. I get that, but there is a way to do it. It's just that they're not going to do it.
Oh yeah, they just won't.